Most music today is about speed, energy. It asks you to keep up, process faster, and move on. But every once in a while, you hear something that does the opposite. It slows you down, and suddenly, you're in a whole new world. Today's guest understands why that happens. Claire Ritter is a composer and pianist whose work moves between classical and jazz, structure and intuition, restraint and release. She learned this music directly from the people who shaped it, from Rand Blake to Mary Lou Williams, a composer who influenced everyone from Duke Ellington to Thelonious Monk. This isn't a second-hand tradition, it's a living one.
I'm not sitting there reading music. I'm doing it out of my head. I think doing it from your head and your soul, memorized and from your soul is really the key.
Across 14 albums and hundreds of compositions, Claire has built a body of work that ranges from quiet and introspective to rhythmically driven and playful. Light, space, and color are aspects of her most recent album, Songs of Lumière, but it's only one expression of a much wider musical vocabulary.
I think musicians have to get back to, the authenticity of their instrument and connection. You got to give yourself space.
In this conversation, we talk about why some music lasts, about how intuition develops over time, and about what it means to carry a tradition forward without keeping it in place. This isn't a conversation about slowing down. It's a conversation about knowing when to. I'm Vonn Vanier, she's Claire Ritter, and this is Beyond the Notes. Claire, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Vonn.
Thank you.
Sounds like an interesting project.
When I listened to your version of When You Wish Upon a Star, it really felt fresh for me. It felt like someone opened a window and felt like Mr. Rogers was playing. It just had that calmness and that sort of familiarity. So what drew you to making your own version of that song in the first place, given that it's so well known and so just such a classic?
Well, some of these ideas actually came out of COVID, and I started composing a few pieces in that period of time, and then on for the next couple of years. But When You Wish Upon a Star was a piece of standard that I taught to my students, and it happened to fit into the whole thread of light and inspiration of light and that kind of thing. But I teach that piece. It's a jazz standard, but I teach it with superimposed chords where you break up the chords and you do some arpeggios in it, and it's kind of got a Thelonious Monk slant to it as well. So it started there. Actually, the whole project started with Cloud and the Moonbeam, which was like the balance of light and dark. And bringing the light out as a surprise, where the moon dances with the cloud and that kind of thing. But Wish Upon a Star kind of came in there about the same time. Yeah, it was, and it's fun teaching that piece because students really enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, I love to play a clip from it. It has a very distinct sound to it. So just for those who aren't familiar, let me play it now. So I was listening to this earlier, and it just totally got stuck in my head. It's it's the very relaxed sort of laid back nature of it.
Yeah.
Do you have an idea or any intention as you were doing this rendition as to how you made that kind of come across?
Well, I think the style, that particular kind, almost bebop style, stride piano, laid back, is a little bit out of Monk, Thelonious Monk, because I play a lot of Monk, and And I love his sense of space. And it's something that actually, I studied with Graham Blake for a number of years, and he
Yeah.
is a big fan of Thelonious Monk and actually knew him in New York.
Mhm.
And so I think the style kind of comes from there in a blend of, and Rand does a lot of superimposed harmonic chords too.
Mhm.
So I think it comes out of sort of that process. But it's always about getting the right flow and the right timing in a piece. It's tricky.
Yeah.
Not too fast, not too slow. It's sort of got to have a groove. So
Mhm.
hopefully that comes across.
Yeah, absolutely. So for you, did it feel natural to, make it kind of rhythmically that way, or did you have to iterate and have it adapt over time?
No, I think that was a very natural style for me.
Yeah.
Um, and when I teach it, of course, I
Mhm.
teach basically three different hand techniques for the left hand. So you learn the arpeggios, you learn the bass line, and you learn the
Yeah.
pipe.
Uh-huh.
But I think learning to really lean in on inside voicings
Mm.
is key, and that's something that's hard to teach. I think it comes from a lot of listening.
Mhm. Yeah. So, I mean, speaking of listening, one of my classical music composition professors earlier this week told me you need to really just listen and uh, hear as much as you can in order to find who you really like and find your voice as a composer. So, when you were getting started, when you were very young, did you know that you wanted to have this specific voice, or that did you know exactly what you wanted to do musically, or did that sort of evolve and just kind of you found it over time?
I think that definitely evolved over time, but the seed started, I think, about sixth or seventh grade. I studied with
Hmm.
a jazz pianist in
Yeah.
Charlotte by the name of Ziggy Hurwitz, and he introduced me to lots of jazz standards and
Mhm.
complicated chord arrangements that he did, but
Yeah.
they were more traditional. And at the time, that was fine,
Mhm.
as a start, because you have to start somewhere. And I was doing classical music, learning classical music as well. So I got that combination of the two.
Yeah.
And I think that was the seed, but I became very curious over the next few years about doing notes outside of a chord and extension notes. And
Yeah.
that's where Mary Lou Williams came into the picture.
Mhm.
Uh, when I was later in my 20s, I studied with her for a couple of years. And, you just don't really have that opportunity for innovative types of ideas in traditional teaching.
But tell me more about when you said innovation, it's harder for that to come out of conventional teaching. How did you find ways to innovate and be creative and put your own personal touch on the things you were learning?
Well, for me, that developed over a period of time.
Mhm.
I would say starting in my mid 20s to my mid 30s, the development of it
Mm.
happened.
Mhm.
And so it was later. I'd already gotten a degree in classical piano, just a traditional degree in
Yeah.
Bachelor of Arts. Um, and I think the actual seasoning of ideas, I was kind of a late bloomer in there. I mean,
Mhm.
nowadays, kids are learning stuff really, really early.
Yeah.
But for me, it was about 25 to 35. And Ram
Mhm.
Blake was a springboard, he's just a harmonic genius in general, but he's such a motivator.
Yeah.
Uh, so I think being in that environment in Boston, um,
Mhm.
and as it turned out, he studied with Mary Lou Williams, and he was a
Mhm.
big Blunt fan, and it was kind of serendipity that I ended up studying with him
Mhm.
and knowing him for a good long period of time. We have worked together and recorded together for now 30, 40 years.
Wow. Uh-huh.
Yeah, he's quite he's quite the abstract cinematic painter as you described it. Uh,
Mhm. Yeah.
And
So,
very unique.
yeah, definitely. Um, so you got a degree in classical piano. but yet you have this very sort of jazzy style, and just hearing you talk about the way you think about music, it sounds very jazz influenced. And
Yes.
that makes me think of, you have plenty of jazz musicians who don't like classical music and plenty of classical musicians who don't like jazz. And then some people who like both. But I think it's much more rare to find someone who blends them into one style in the way you do.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I teach a number of different kinds of musicians, as well
Mhm.
as some symphonic musicians that come to me and want to improvise as classical musicians. And
Yeah.
it's very difficult and it's very unusual for them to be curious enough to let themselves go, to take those risks, to do those kinds of things.
Mhm.
I was playing music by ear, probably starting about 7 years old.
Do you remember any like aha moments in terms of finding intersections between classical and jazz, and how that helped you, blend them?
Yeah, I think a fascination with chords, because
Mm.
I play intuitively, and I
Mhm.
use a tape recorder to record ideas and concepts. So I don't try
Yeah.
to write everything down.
Uh-huh.
I may write down a chord structure or a phrase or a melody, but
Yeah.
most of it is in my head as I
Mm.
go along. So
Mhm.
it's very intuitive. It's not academic necessarily, although I have a lot of academic ideas in my toolbox, but
Yeah.
I think it's a combination of being able to know a lot of scales and all the keys and all the colors
Mhm.
um, by ear,
Yeah.
and also hearing some unusual chord structures and
Mm.
being able to articulate those on your instrument and on your acoustic instrument. I mean,
Mhm.
unfortunately, today I think so many musicians are trying to use the digital and electronic
Mm.
devices to come up with all kinds of things. But that's
Yeah.
certainly using the imagination. It's creative, but I think connecting with your instrument and finding and developing a sound is
Yeah.
part of your artistic journey.
Mhm.
And fortunately, I think musicians don't take enough time to do that now.
That totally reminds me of one of the other pieces I want to talk about of yours, "Sky Full of Rainbows," which, well, I'll let the music speak for itself, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on the idea of personality, and what you were thinking as you were, writing this. So I'll play a quick segment here. Mm. So first of all, for the people listening, what do you want them to get out of that, or to pay attention to?
Well, it was sort of coming to me like a dream.
Hmm.
That and the piece "Color the Dream," which is also on the album.
Yeah.
Um, but it was a bit of melancholy too, because I lost a niece during COVID
Hmm.
time, and it was partly that. It's always a combination of different things, and then it becomes a little ambiguous.
Yeah.
But I was hearing a kind of a poem, and I wrote some words to what I
Hmm.
was feeling
Mhm.
about a sky full of rainbows. And, um, in a sky full of rainbows, you soar high above the clouds. And
Hmm.
it's sort of, yeah, it's a combination of different superimposed chords. And then I do some classical runs in it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I make up my runs. And so
Uh-huh.
hopefully you're not using scales, you're using ideas that just come to you that are
Mm.
not what you normally hear.
Mhm.
But I think it comes out of a dream, and then it comes out of light and trying to create that thread of light,
Yeah.
through the whole album. And I use some triads to, kind of give it that kind of rainbow,
Mm.
that kind of in
Yeah.
the, and it's in the key of B.
Yeah.
By the way, that key of B is very rich on the piano. Uh,
Mhm. Hmm.
but yeah, it was my choice for an introduction to the whole album.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the first part of it, it feels to me very, it feels almost rhythmically and just in terms of the tone structures you're using, almost a little bit, early 20th century kind of classical style. And then, and you establish this very kind of clear idea of what you're doing with the texture and the harmony. And then it kind of switches to something after the first, couple phrases that feels a lot more jazzy to me, but it melds really well. So we're for that first little segment of it, were you thinking of that as just introductory material, or did it just come to you to include that? Or
You know, when I go in the studio, and I always go into, professional studio, do these recordings, but
yeah,
I usually do about 3 takes,
wow,
and then I'll
mm,
pick, the one I like best. It's all 3 are different.
yeah,
They're always different.
huh,
So I think that element of spontaneity is
mhm,
what kinda gives it something special.
yeah,
If you can, I'm not sitting there reading music, I'm doing it out of
yeah,
my head.
uh-huh,
And I have a lead sheet, but it's
yeah,
always gonna be a little bit different, and the expression is gonna be a little bit different, and the inside voicings are gonna be emphasized a little bit differently.
yeah,
So I think part of that is the key to getting something fresh
hmm,
and getting, the spacing, of the chords and the expression in the chords.
yeah,
Uh, I think doing it from your head and your soul, I mean,
mm,
memorized
mhm,
and from your soul is really the key.
yeah. So you're definitely efficient, it sounds like, in the studio, and nice and inspired. You're not one of the people that does like 50 takes on something.
No, no, that
Mm.
and I've done it a few times.
Uh-huh.
So, but that's kind of the approach, and I think that comes out of, studying with Rand Blake,
Yeah.
because he doesn't read music very well, actually,
Hmm.
but which is his power probably, and his uniqueness.
Right. And so, speaking of Rand Blake, with Songs of Lumiere, which is the album that you've released, where these pieces come from, has this very kind of Monet style to it. And I think, as you've mentioned, part of that uh, probably comes from Rand Blake and your time with him. So, what was his mentorship like to you, and how, why continue with him for 34 years as you have?
Well, I think his students are his family. He's very he's the world networker. I mean,
Yeah.
he's just a unique person, and he really gives a lot of himself.
Hmm.
Um, in that way, you really look up to him, because he keeps that connection with his students.
Yeah.
We drilled melodies from around the world.
Mhm.
We drilled intervals. We drilled chords.
Hmm.
Um, and it just
Mhm.
you absorb a lot of that through osmosis when you study with a great person. But
Yeah.
it's also his friendship,
Hmm.
which is very special, and it's he has hundreds of really great students that he stays in touch with.
Yeah.
But he's in his 90s now, so
Mhm.
I recorded my last album with him. I think it was released in 19, which was Eclipse Orange.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if you're familiar with that one,
Hmm.
but yeah, he he's recorded a lot of albums. He's quite the musician, but also quite the friend in person.
Yeah. So you mentioned you also studied with Mary Lou Williams, and I'd imagine that would have been totally special for you and for anyone studying with her. So
Yeah.
first of all, for those not familiar with her, who was she, and what was studying with her like, and how did that contribute to
Oh,
your learning?
she was one of the most respected jazz pianists, and still is, of her era.
Yeah.
And she influenced and taught and was friends
Mhm.
with, Monk and Coltrane, and she wrote for Duke Ellington and Andy Kirk, and
Yeah.
she really did a lot. She got 2 Guggenheim
Mhm.
rewards, and she really was not recognized as much as she should have been.
Hmm.
So she was on the level. I mean, she was on the same level
Yeah.
there. And I met her at Duke University
Mhm.
in the late 70s, and I had to drive long distance because I'm in Charlotte.
Yeah.
Um, so I didn't have as many lessons as I wanted to with her, but
Mhm.
I did have a few, and she was probably the spark that got me going
Mm.
in more innovative jazz,
Yeah.
because that was before Rand.
Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah, because she used to write down ideas spontaneously, and she, by the
Mhm.
way, like Nina Simone, she would take classical pieces and put her own rendition on classical pieces too. So she,
Yeah.
played mostly by ear
Uh-huh.
too. Um, so that was a big turning point.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I think as far as method, Rand was the one that really instilled these tools
Hmm.
to, to do a lot, and he gave me the resources to
Mhm.
go further. Um,
Do you remember any stories with her that just really stand out, that speak very much to the way she taught you, or just that were interesting in general from your time with her?
yeah, well, I mean, she was encouraging. I mean, she said I definitely needed to be in jazz. I was
Yeah.
I was playing Rhapsody in Blue and Gershwin's Three Preludes. I was
Uh-huh.
playing, all the jazz traditional pieces I could get my hands on. But yeah, I didn't really get into composing with her because I didn't have time. But
Mhm.
I was introduced to some very interesting chord structures.
Yeah.
And I went to hear her live. Another turning point for me was hearing her at Spoleto,
Hmm.
uh, play live there in Charleston. So she did inspire me to, she was recording her zoning record back then, and she inspired me to name my recording company Zoning.
Yeah.
I took that from her.
Hmm.
Um,
Mhm.
her definition of zoning was the process of connecting with your collaborators,
Hmm.
which was a very special connection.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah, that was a springboard for me.
Mhm. So you talk a lot about this rich legacy of um, mentors that you've had, and the mentors of your mentors. What do you think is the importance of that, and the importance of carrying on that legacy? And what are the implications of having these sort of lineages of musical greats in your past, and carrying that forward?
Well, I'm at a point I've made in my life where I've made 14 recordings of mostly original music. I have several hundred compositions I've written.
Yeah.
So I'm at the point in my life where I need to be documenting.
Mm.
So, it's everything is documented in lead sheet form, but I would like to document it. I've started a book, which will
Yeah.
be a philosophy and method of the pieces that I composed and that I
Mm.
teach,
Uh-huh.
that have concepts and motifs as a springboard to ideas. in classical and jazz. And so when I teach students, I teach, a wide range of students.
Yeah.
For me, my next step is to not only continue composing, because you do that forever, but
Mhm.
to archive these ideas.
Mhm.
Um, mostly for educational purposes, but for inspirational purposes.
When you teach and with this book, um, sometimes for me it can feel like with classical, which is what I mainly focus on, but also jazz, which I do a little bit of too, that these are genres that are less popular among the youth today and are for in a lot of people's conceptions very rooted in the past or a genre that's old and not important anymore.
Yeah.
So when you're teaching and writing this book and trying to continue the legacy and the lineage of what you've learned, how do you try to imbue that passion and spread and share the importance of these genres today?
That's a good question too.
Mhm.
I just had a student that made top 8 in American Idol
Well,
in April, and I
uh-huh.
taught him for 10 years. He he's great. He uses his ear.
Yeah.
That was his superpower, is
Uh-huh.
his superpower. And he's young. He's only 24 years old.
Mhm.
Um, but you know, just being part of that whole American Idol scene in last April,
Yeah.
they everything's digital, everything's electronic, everything's done in the studio, everything is programmed.
Yeah.
So the problem is, you know, you're not with your instrument. I mean, he's with his voice, but
Mhm.
they pull you away from your instrument and it becomes a show.
Yeah.
So, it's all about, it seems like now it's about the money or the show or the
Mhm.
glitter or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, I think musicians have to get back to, the authenticity
Hmm.
of their instrument and connection. You know, too much, way too much background, going on. You got to
Yeah.
have, you got to give yourself
Mhm.
space, and I
Mhm.
think that's what one thing you caught on to, which is important to you too.
Do you ever struggle to get your students to, feel motivated to practice or just feel kind of connected to the music in general?
Well, I think spurring an idea is, and having them hear other people
Hmm.
do take the same piece
Mhm.
and pick a masterful piece and do
Yeah.
their interpretation of the piece. That's what happened at the conservatory. We would take and study one piece, but everybody would play it differently.
Yeah.
So, and then hearing the other ideas, you know,
Mhm.
in a small group,
Yeah.
is inspiring. But I think also hearing different interpretations from different musicians, being in a
Yeah.
stimulating
Uh-huh.
environment
Yeah.
is
Do you
crucial.
do you think that's something that can only really be done in jazz, where there's so much room for interpretation, and when you get a lead sheet, you just get basic chords, and you can sort of do whatever you want with them, or do
Yeah.
you think that that can be done in any genre of music?
Well, I think it can be done to some extent in any genre, but I think the beauty of jazz is that you do only have that sketch.
Yeah.
So when you only have that sketch, you have to have a lot of imagination to
Mhm.
figure out what you're going to do and the transitions, the fill-ins, how are you going to rephrase it?
Yeah.
Uh, you know, there are a lot of different elements that go into it, and it
Mhm.
it it, it forces you to, and that's what I have students do is to not look at the whole piece of music, to just look at the lead sheet.
Hmm.
So it's just you're just working off the chords, or
Yeah.
and the melody by ear, perhaps not even looking at the notes,
Mhm.
the melody, but learning the melody by ear,
Yeah.
and you know learning to love space between the intervals
Hmm.
too. Large leaps, intervals, unusual intervals.
Hmm.
and making something of that.
Do you have any final advice for young people who are whether composers or musicians trying to grow their voice and evolve into the genres of classical and jazz?
Yeah, I think perseverance and patience, and just some really good training, and surround yourself by people that you admire, and
Yeah.
good musicians that are better than you.
Mm.
There always there's always a lot to learn, and
Mhm.
everybody, and it seems like nowadays people they put expectations on you to do things quickly,
Mm.
but it's art doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So if it, if I think of it kind of like art song without words,
Mhm.
it's poetry. Um,
Mm.
so I think just be patient and persevere, and study with the masters that someone you really admire. And
Mm.
that's the way to go.
Well, wow,
Go to them.
yeah. Uh, that's really spectacularly wise, and something I think that gets at the heart of what music is really about for me, and yeah, so I'm very grateful for all that you shared today.
Well, I appreciate the collaboration, and
Yeah.
Vaughn, and it was good. Thanks for reaching out.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much again. It's been a joy, and thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you.